In San Francisco, and for Emily Chang, this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, big tech and Congress agree on the need for stronger digital privacy laws. The question is just how far should those laws go? We hear from the latest on the hearings on the Hill. Plus, internet unicorn Stripe's latest funding round pushes it up to a $20 billion valuation. Our exclusive chat with the company's chief financial officer is just ahead. And the IMF sees technology killing 26 million jobs, and outlook for women isn't great. We hear from Managing Director Christine Lagarde at the Bloomberg Global Business Forum. But first to our top story. Well, it looks like big tech and Congress agree on one thing, that there's a need for stronger consumer digital privacy laws. Take a listen here to what Len Calley, AT&T Senior Vice President for Public Policy, told senators on Wednesday.
AT&T welcomes today's conversation. We believe it is important for Congress to weigh in on the issue of privacy and provide consumers and business clear national rules concerning how consumer information is used, shared, and protected, regardless of the company that collects it. We are not newcomers to this position, and now there appears to be growing agreement about the need for a new and comprehensive federal privacy law.
Calley was one of 6 representatives from big tech companies, including Apple, Google, Amazon, Twitter, and Charter Communications, who are testifying before members of the Senate Commerce Committee. And while they agreed with senators on the need for new regulation, they differed on the details of how those new laws need to work. Here to tell us more are 2 people who were at the hearing today. Michael Beckerman is the CEO of the Internet Association, a tech lobbying group that represents Amazon, Google, and Twitter, all of whom were on the Hill today. Also with us, Bloomberg's Ben Brody, who covers tech lobbying. Michael, I want to start out with you. What were your big takeaways from the hearings today? I mean, are we any closer to agreement between the lawmakers and tech companies on potential legislation?
Yeah, this was a very important hearing. Certainly will not be the last. I do think it says a lot that our members, in particular internet companies, are pushing so hard for a national framework to give meaningful control and meaningful transparency to all Americans over their data. You should know who has your information, how they're using it, and we're calling on Congress to pass a law that will have a unified standard for our whole country that protects people, but also allows for the innovation that has made our internet sector so vibrant here in the United States.
Now, Ben, Richard Blumenthal and a few other lawmakers called out these tech companies for, yes, supporting very high-level ideas, but when it actually comes to the bill, they'll kill it with their teeth. So do you think these tech companies are actually committed to this process?
Well, that's something Michael certainly can speak to. I do think the details are going to be really, really interesting. There were a lot of moments where senators urged the various officials who were testifying to sort of weigh in on a particular issue, and what they often said was maybe, or qualified no, or qualified yes. Look, this is the law, and the language matters, and so it's a little bit hard to sort of go into a hearing environment and toss off an idea and ask someone to weigh in on it or not. But I do think that when it comes to drafting that language, there absolutely are going to be a lot of differences of opinion within tech and then also outside of tech that I think are going to be worth watching. One of the big ones that I'm watching is definitely going to be enforcement, and I do think some of Michael's folks will be talking heavily about how they want that to look.
And now, Michael, many of the Internet Association companies have been very critical of GDPR, and I just want us to take a quick listen to this exchange between a senator and Google about GDPR.
Offhand, any idea on how many human hours it might have taken for Google's workforce to bring the company into compliance with the GDPR?
We do have some analysis of that I would be happy to share with your staff, sir. I don't have those numbers available with me today.
Would you estimate that it was in the thousands of hours?
I would estimate that it was in the hundreds of years of human time.
Hundreds of years of human time. Michael, what do you make of that?
GDPR is very complicated. It's still being implemented, and folks are are complying with it, particularly our member companies. But it is a very complicated law, and one maybe that's not best for innovation or startups. There are many American newspapers, for example, that have decided they'd had to shut down their websites in Europe. Even Outback Steakhouse closed their website down in Europe because they couldn't figure out how to comply with it. And this is exactly why we need an American approach. We need a federal law here in the United States that shows that we can be leaders in technology, but also we can be leaders in privacy protections. And we need to get it right. The details matter. We're behind this 110%, and we're already working on text, and we're willing to sit down with all lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to make sure this gets done.
And now, Ben, Chairman Thune spoke with reporters after the hearing, and he spoke about data security. What did you learn?
Well, he said, as we've known, that data security has been really difficult. Data security has been legislation. It's been being negotiated really for several years. It's come out over a couple of Congresses. This is interesting because security is one of the issues that we've heard, as we've gotten this sort of consensus from industry just over the last days and weeks, that security has to be a big part of this. So I think that's another issue that I'm going to be watching, where companies within tech and then companies outside of tech are going to be really talking pretty strenuously about what it means to have security, and especially who has the burden for that, and then what it looks like if that goes wrong.
Now, Michael, almost all of the privacy proposals that have been floated by the tech community suggest that a federal legislation should preempt the California state privacy law. So what are the key flaws that they see in this California data privacy law?
Well, a couple of things. One, people's expectation of privacy doesn't change as you cross from state to state. And it doesn't make sense if you're driving or flying across the country to kick into brand new privacy laws as you go from border to border, or if you're FaceTiming with your grandmother in another state to have the two of you be under different privacy laws. I don't think makes a lot of sense. As it relates to the California law, they just got it wrong. This is something they pushed through in a very short period of time. GDPR, as complicated as it took years to draft and implement, California did it in days. And also, there are things in the California law that we think make people less private and less safe. There are provisions in the law that prohibit companies from anonymizing and de-identifying information. You can't aggregate information that's not associated with people to meet the requirements of the law, and I think that's something that's flawed, and we can do a better job. We should have a state-of-the-art, best in class, best in the world privacy law that protects all 50 states and not a piecemeal approach.
Ben, what's your take on what Michael just said? Consumer advocates have a very different perspective about the California data privacy law and the role that states should play in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them would like to defend tougher state laws. If states want to go strict, they say, there's no reason we should stop that. Increasingly, what I'm hearing out of the consumers is that they want the federal law to essentially be a baseline, but it's something that the states can go over and above. I do expect that that'll be another point of tension, not so much within industry, but between industry and the consumer point of view. And I think it's important to note that this was an industry hearing, but the chairman, John Thune, said that there would be in early October a hearing with consumer advocates, including somebody who was Alistair McTaggart, a real estate developer, who was kind of behind that privacy law that went into effect in California.
All right, Michael Beckerman of the Internet Association and Bloomberg's Ben Brody, thank you both for joining us. And speaking of protecting customer data, Uber has paid a hefty price for failing to do so in 2016. The ride-hailing company has paid $146 million to settle claims over a data breach that exposed the personal information of more than 24 million U.S. customers. Now, this makes the payout the largest in data breach history. Hackers obtained 607,000 driver's license phone numbers, as well as phone numbers and addresses for tens of millions of users. Uber failed to disclose the breach for more than a year after discovering the hack. And coming up, internet unicorn Stripe's about to complete yet another round of funding, pushing it to a new valuation. We'll hear from the company CFO in just a moment. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Online payment and financial operations company Stripe is about to complete its latest funding round, valuing the startup at $20 billion. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde is standing by in New York with the company's chief financial officer, William Gabrick. Caroline?
Selena, thanks very much indeed. Will, what a valuation. $20 billion, got to hand it to you. And what's interesting about Stripe is that already it's serving, 80% of Americans at the moment have basically made a transaction in the last year with your tech underlying it. I want to know what the $250 million or thereabouts you've just raised is going to be useful.
Well, first of all, Caroline, thank you so much for having me here today. So Stripe is a technology company that builds economic infrastructure for the internet. And one thing that's sort of amazing is we're now about 3 decades into the consumer internet, and yet only 3% of global GDP is online.
Tiny.
And so our mission is actually to grow the GDP of the internet. And fundamentally, this financing is about doubling down on that.
So where are we talking? Asia? How are you looking to expand geographically?
Well, we're at a fascinating moment in the history of the internet right now. You mentioned a second ago that it's actually about 84% of American adults have made a purchase from a Stripe user in the past year. On the other hand, there are 500 million people in India and Southeast Asia who are coming online for the first time in the next 3 years. Now, this progress doesn't just happen. There's all sorts of infrastructural hurdles related to expanding into new countries. And so Stripe is focused on providing the payments infrastructure to allow for that expansion, to bring these regions online.
Other hurdles, of course, are the very fact that at a time that we're talking about globalizing payments, we're actually seeing globalization get a knock or two when it comes to geopolitics. We need to look at trade tensions between China and the US. I mean, you already serve companies such as Didi, which is over in China. How has that affected you?
Well, you know, it's interesting because in some ways it creates a challenge for Stripe. In other ways, it makes us even more useful for our users. The funny thing about the internet is it was actually designed without borders in mind. The core protocols, HTTP, don't have borders or countries written into them. But as soon as you bring money into the equation, all the borders come back on the map because borders matter a great deal to currencies and banks and regulators and payment methods. So as things like GDPR or PSD2 are new challenges for our users, it actually makes us even more helpful to them.
Okay, so maybe geopolitics is helpful, maybe regulatory issues for companies are actually helpful to Stripe. What about the clients that you're serving? It's quite standout who you are serving, not only the startup giants such as Uber and Didi, but you've also got, I mean, scaled companies. Google is one of your clients, so too is Spotify. What are they using you exactly for?
Well, it's interesting because the analogy here is actually a good one to Amazon Web Services.
Okay.
You know, we started a few years ago serving small companies and startups and just helping them go faster. But you know, as you mentioned, over the past few years, we've seen larger and larger companies turning to us as well. So we're excited to announce today Uber, Google, Didi, and Spotify. We're finding they're solving the same problems that small companies are facing. It's expanding faster, building new product lines, going into new countries, and all sorts of things like that.
What about your competition? Because Adyen, which listed recently over in Europe, is a payments company, and they serve some of these clients too that you've just listed. Are you poaching them from them? Are you both serving them?
Well, you know, I'd take us back to that stat we talked about before, which is about 3% of global commerce is online. So there's a huge amount of headroom for growth here. What's unique about our approach is that our product is a deeply integrated technology stack. We call it our Global Payments and Treasury Network, GPTN. And this is really about allowing these companies to expand faster and solve their hardest problems with the click of a checkbox or a single parameter added to their integration.
So maybe you can both survive. Interestingly, Adyen did go public. You're worth $20 billion. You're raising money from the private market. We're at near record highs in the stock market. Why haven't you gone public?
Well, we've got a lot on our plates already. We're sort of fully launched in 25 countries with a few more in private beta. That means there's order of 169 countries that we're not in today. We're dealing with regulators all over the world, a lot of the challenges you mentioned before, and so we've got plenty to do, and we're very happy as a private company. It
wouldn't help you serve more clients, do you think, having the transparency that a public company gives you, that you can get in more doors maybe?
You know, it could perhaps, but we've seen over the past few years, this sort of pull up market from the likes of Amazon, MindBody, Microsoft, or as you mentioned earlier, Google, Didi, Spotify, and so it's a problem that sort of solved itself over time.
Not needed it thus far. I'm interested in also the moving money quickly. What it says in your statement is that you're looking to move money quickly, reliably, and programmatically anywhere in the world. It sounds almost as though what blockchain enthusiasts are saying might be upended by cryptocurrencies, by blockchain technology. Are you using blockchain technology at Stripe yet?
So Stripe was actually the first major payments company to support Bitcoin transactions some 5 years ago. Interestingly, we found that it wasn't really solving problems for our users. So I think it was late last year that we actually deprecated support for Bitcoin. That said, we are very interested in what's happening in the blockchain space, and we're closely tracking it.
You gave us that stat at the start, which is at the moment only 3% of all commerce is online. Where is it going? How quickly will we start to see that a majority of commerce is actually online? Because it feels that everyone's on their smartphones the entirety, whether it is here in the US, but also in India already, in China already.
Yeah. Well, we're a few decades in, and global online commerce is still only about 1.5 trillion, whereas global GDP is something like 70 trillion. So that's where that 3%-ish comes from. Over the next few years, we're looking at it probably going to something like 5%, so not meteoric growth, but if we do our job right, hopefully it'll grow even faster.
And where will you grow to? It's interesting that you associated yourselves with Amazon. Amazon happens to have just reached $1 trillion. When you think of yourselves worth 20 billion, where do you think this company will go? You used to be at the investor base, you used to be at Thrive Capital, which put money into Stripe. Where do you, with your financial hat, think this will go?
Well, it's an enormous opportunity, as we're raising money from the likes of Tiger Global and DST and Sequoia here. Obviously the expectations are very high, so we don't see 20 billion as being anywhere near the end.
Where? Where are the expectations?
Hopefully many, many multiples higher than where we are.
Will, it's been so great having you here. Thank you for passing through the East Coast and sitting down with us. Of course, Will Graebick. Great to have him, the CFO of Stripe. Selena.
Caroline Hyde there speaking with Stripe CFO Will Graebick in New York. Coming up, SurveyMonkey finally hits the public market, but while the company climbed on its trading debut, questions still hang over its business. Can the company keep up despite its large free user base? We'll discuss next. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. After nearly 20 years of business, SurveyMonkey has finally gone public. The online polling company surged as much as 67% in its trading debut after raising $180 million in its IPO Tuesday. For over 2 decades, SurveyMonkey has expanded its products beyond just survey software, building tools for data collection like market research and talent management. They've even begun partnering with companies like Salesforce and Google. But while the company has had more than 16 million users in the past year, only 3.8 were paying users. I spoke with CEO Xander Lurie.
We are thrilled to begin trading today on the NASDAQ. For us, the IPO was really a culmination of a lot of work over the last couple of years. As you mentioned, this is a 19-year-old business with an incredibly stable, healthy business where we have over 600,000 paid users and over 16 million active users using our products. But for us, it's really about the opportunity to talk to the enterprise customers where we have paying users inside of 300,000 organizations, and we have this incredible new platform with security and administrative features, which enable people to listen to the diverse voices and opinions of the people who matter to them. So going public is an awesome opportunity to get on TV and in the press to talk about our products and really help our sales team fully capitalize on the opportunity at hand.
Right, you have an impressive 16 million active users, but less than 5% of them are actually paying. So what's the plan to increase monetization?
Sure. We have one of the elegant business models that was created almost 19 years ago, as you said, with our product. We love our free users. Our free users can come on, send surveys, help propagate our brand in the footprints where they work and live. We have very, very de minimis costs with our free users, and then it's on us to move them through the product and have all the value opportunities that's available to our users in our paid product. And we've done a really good job. Over 90% of our paying users are on a subscription basis. The vast majority of our users stay with us for a long time. And fortunately for our business, 80% of our paid users come to us via a free channel, often on the back of a survey, Selena, that you might send to your users. So it's our customers who are introducing us to our future customers.
Now, sales grew about 5% from 2016 to 2017. It did pick up slightly this year, but what's the plan to accelerate future revenue growth?
Yeah, thank you. We grew 21% year over year in the second quarter. And we have a handful of initiatives which are really driving healthy growth across the company. I think first and foremost, we have always been a very cash flow generative company. It's been a hallmark of our growth over the years. The first thing we're doing is we are spurring international growth. So we're lighting up a data center with AWS in Q1. We're really excited about our sites internationally being faster, crisper, and really appealing to the vast global market. Secondly, we've just launched a Teams product, which is really a great opportunity for people who are sharing accounts to have their own accounts. And then thirdly, most importantly, it's these huge footprints where inside the companies where we serve hundreds, sometimes thousands of people are collecting mission-critical data with SurveyMonkey. And we now have an enterprise platform to bring all of those users onto a shared platform, provide IT with a kind of holistic protection of that data, and give all of our end users the rich featured enterprise product. That's a motion that will spur growth for many years to come.
And now I want to understand just how important this international growth piece is going to be. It seems like you're almost reaching saturation in the U.S. with 98% penetration for paying customers in the Fortune 500 here in the U.S.
So we are fortunate to have penetrated 98% of the Fortune 500, as you said. But for the 300,000 organizations where we have paying users, we have only converted 1% of those onto the enterprise contract. And so I think my message to all the C-suite viewers on Bloomberg would be: people across your company are measuring employee engagement, NPS scores, the culture of customer centricity, really critical programs in their individual accounts. And SurveyMonkey now has an incredible enterprise platform that we can put you on that will give you much richer access to that data and give you more protection. As far as international, Selena, we are thrilled to expand our international business. It's 35% of our business today. I think many world-class internet companies eclipse that 50% threshold. I have a lot of confidence that with our strategy, with lighting up data centers and localizing our product in the markets that we serve, we will also accelerate international sales.
And lastly, Xander, tennis star and entrepreneur Serena Williams joined your board last year. How has she impacted the business so far, or the way that you think about the company?
I think it is critical for private companies to be very mindful of the board of directors they choose to represent the shareholders. I think boards today are increasingly aware, because of your coverage and others, just how critical not just the business but the culture is at these companies. And the best fiduciaries in the world are really mindful of how good of a job is leadership doing, not only with the business model but the employee culture. If it can be known, it will be known. That is what the democratization of the internet provides. Serena Williams is a leader. She has been an advocate on critical issues like pay equity, that she has stood up for folks whose voices are not often heard. She's also an incredible marketer. She's a business leader herself. And maybe most importantly, Serena Williams has been dominating the industry that she competes in for almost 20 years. So she's taught us a lot about grit. But not just Serena, with Sheryl Sandberg and Brad Smith and Sue Decker, we've been fortunate to have an incredible board of directors. And Serena obviously plays a key role on that team.
SurveyMonkey CEO Xander Lurie there. Coming up, the EU has cracked down on Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Now its latest target is Amazon. We hear from the EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager on its most recent probe on the U.S. tech giant. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Selena Wang in San Francisco, in for Emily Chang. Elon Musk is hoping to harness the power of Tesla's fan base to drive the company's second quarter results. Longtime Tesla customers are volunteering at delivery centers to answer questions from buyers, while sales staff focus on new purchases. To make sense of this latest turn in the Tesla tale, Bloomberg News' Dana Holt joins us now. Dana, you've been talking to these volunteers all day. Why are they there, and what are they doing?
So a lot of these volunteers are existing Tesla owners. They own a Model S or an X. Some of them even have 3s, and they are very passionate about the company and the product. And they recognize that this is kind of a make or break quarter for Tesla, and they want to help out. So it all began on Twitter, of course, where an existing owner sort of volunteered to Elon Musk, like, hey, like, I'm an owner. Do you want me to kind of help out? And Musk was like, that would be awesome. And now you're seeing droves of people volunteering themselves and going to existing Tesla showrooms to help out.
What does this say exactly, though, about about the ability of Tesla to get cars out the door fast enough.
I think the issue is that people are buying electric cars for the first time, and they have a lot of questions about charging, about where the supercharger is, about how to live with an electric vehicle. And these are questions that existing electric vehicle drivers are more than happy to answer. So they're kind of like a secondary line of defense, helping new owners get acclimated to driving their car. And the service centers are packed. I mean, the staff cannot handle the bandwidth right now.
Now, pressure is increasing from investors. They want to see profitability. What are the expectations for sales of this particular model?
You know, it's pretty high this quarter. So Musk has indicated that they're going to deliver and sell more than double than they did last quarter. Even David Tamburino of Goldman Sachs was a sell rating on the stock, is expecting 52,000 deliveries just of the Model 3 in the third quarter. That would be a lot. I mean, that would be like way more than double last quarter.
Now, Tesla is facing the SEC probe. You've been reporting on the management shakeup. There's a lot going on right now. When you talk to sources, is culture within the company at an all-time low?
I think what's interesting is that they have not hired any high-ranking executives from outside recently. They recently announced some promotions from within, but they don't have a COO. They haven't had any big, like, marquee names from outside in a while. And you're seeing this attrition happening at kind of an advanced clip since we've learned about the SEC and the DOJ.
All right, Bloomberg News' Dana Hull, thanks for the update. Now, Lyft is trying to wean people off using their personal cars with a new promotion paying them to keep them in their garages. The ride-hailing company's founder predicted car ownership in major American cities would be non-existent by 2025. Now, it's offering credits of $500 to $600 to customers who keep their cars at home and take Lyfts instead. The company will choose about 2,000 people to participate in the test, which will run for about a month. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, Bloomberg has been live all day at Bloomberg's Global Business Forum. We've spoken to a number of world leaders in finance, business, and tech. Bloomberg editor-in-chief John Micklethwaite spoke with the EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager and asked her about the recent probe on U.S. tech giant Amazon.
Amazon is it's a two-sided market. They have dual functions. They both host the little guy, so he can enter into e-commerce. They provide a number of services, which allows also smaller businesses to be active e-commerce and to grab the opportunities, and that's great. They're also a big guy themselves. Bookstore, everything. Groceries, movies, the works. And they, of course, get all the data from the little guy, and we want to understand how this data is being used. Because this is all about competition. Because when we say innovation, well, competition is the most important driver for innovation, for you to stay ahead of your competitor.
And do you think the future is a bit like telecoms companies, or maybe what happened with Microsoft many years ago, where you have a platform company which is then forced to let other people trade and have access to that platform?
Well, I think that's very difficult to say because, as it was just said in the video, this is a revolution. Things change, and we haven't even seen what is coming with quantum computing, blockchain sort of really pulling off. So we probably have a platform economy that's much more diverse than what we have seen, which is why, of course, it's important for us to understand, well, what is the new big? How are companies that benefit from networks effects, from huge amounts of data, from marginal costs approaching zero, how do they compete? And for us, that, of course, is the important thing.
Do you think in some ways competition law has been left behind by big tech? You have these companies where you talked about network effects. It is very difficult to intervene until after they have created these, I suppose, near monopolies, as some people would see them.
Well, I think our principles are fine because they are about human nature, and we don't change, unfortunately. With all our good sides and bad sides, I think we remain the same. But of course, in the regulation, we need to stay alert because you can be big. In Europe, you can be successful, but you shouldn't misuse your power. This is actually the story of the two Google finds. Very successful, very welcome in Europe, but we find that they misuse their power for competitors not to be as innovative as they ought to, for consumers not to be able to enjoy the benefits of choice, innovation, affordable prices. And that, of course, is where we have to be very, very vigilant.
But isn't the Google thing an example of what I just said? You know, it took you 7 years. In tech, 7 years is a lifetime.
Yes, part of that is part of the game, because there is an asymmetry in every kind of law enforcement. Because in another example, it takes 5 minutes to break into your home. It will take the police and the court system quite some time to find the guilty person, to get him or her convicted and put away.
Hopefully not 7 years. I don't know.
No, but you still have responsibility to due process. Because we live in a union based on the rule of law, and we will never, ever compromise on your right to defend yourself. That being said, of course, we can use algorithms too. We can use all the tools of a digital world in order for us to be more speedy.
And do you think tech firms have simply become too big in some cases?
No, I don't think as such that you can make that conclusion, but I think they can be much more transparent. My colleagues have made, I think, very, very good proposals to ensure transparency in the relationship between the smaller business and the platform. And that, I think, is very much needed. The transparency, the willingness actually to deal with people, and to be much more sort of clear that they respect your privacy, your ownership of your own data, so that we as citizens feel that we can build trust with technology.
That was EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager with Bloomberg Editor-in-Chief John Micklethwait at the annual Bloomberg Global Business Forum in New York. Now coming up, world and business leaders have been speaking at Bloomberg's Global Business Forum in New York. We'll hear from IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde and Baidu CEO Robin Li on the future impacts of artificial intelligence. Also, when we return, can an AI-powered app help solve gender equity? We'll find out. This is Bloomberg. On Monday, we reported Google had made some serious changes to Chrome that would potentially impact user privacy. Critics said Google would automatically sign in a user while using Chrome. And today, CNBC is saying with a report that Google has revamped this feature, saying users will once again be able to use the web browser without being automatically signed in. Bloomberg has been live all day at the Global Business Forum. We've spoken to a number of world leaders in finance, business, and tech. And in a conversation between IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde and Baidu CEO Robin Li, Lagarde mentioned a study on new technologies like artificial intelligence and biotech that the IMF is about to release and how it may impact millions of jobs around the world.
Essentially, the finding is that, and we extrapolated from 30 OECD countries to the rest of the world. Right. And the conclusion was that quite a lot of jobs will be significantly, materially affected. Yeah. When we look at those 30 countries, it will be about 26 million jobs that will actually probably disappear. Mm-hmm. The second findings, which I thought was interesting, is that because it applies essentially to those tasks that are repetitive, mm-hmm. and because there are more women doing those jobs. Right. Women are likely to be more affected than men by the impact of artificial intelligence on the labor market. Do you think that's true?
It could be true, but like I said, that's just one side of the coin. There's another side that labeling is. You can also say it's kind of repetitive. You need humans.
But you need to apply judgment.
Yeah. Yes. No? Relatively simple judgment. It's not that hard. For example, if you try to teach the computer to drive, it's not that hard. Most people, when they grow up, they can learn how to drive. But it's it's actually very, very hard for computers to learn how to drive. Although, companies like Baidu and quite a few other companies and Ford too are working on autonomous driving, and we are quite a few years away from truly, self-driving. It's still, I would say, highly autonomous vehicles, not really completely, free from drivers. So we will use computer to enhance the human activities.
You don't want to replace us?
Right, no, there's...
okay.
Yeah,
am I allowed one more question? I'm expected to really speed. I want to ask you one, because you have 40,000 employees around the world, many of whom are in China. Are you enjoying a regime, an environment, a framework that enables you to research, develop anything you want?
Pretty much, yes. I think...
Too much.
Yeah, we have lots of engineers, and China is a big market. There are lots of people, and we have like hundreds of millions of users use our services every day, and a lot of data is generated. We can use data to learn how to improve our services. So we do have a lot of opportunities to innovate. But that being said, there are constraints like how do you protect privacy, and how do you make sure that the technology does not go out of control, that's do bad things to the mankind. There are things that we need to worry about, but I do see more opportunities than threats.
That was IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde and Baidu CEO Robin Li. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, at the current rate of progress, it will take over 200 years to close the gender equality gap. Here in San Francisco, women make on average 80 cents on the dollar that men do. What's more, women only get 47 cents on the dollar when it comes to equity. But now there's a software platform and app that hopes it can help change that. Pipeline launched the first gender equity app in the Salesforce App Exchange. Here to discuss is Pipeline's founder and CEO, Katika Roy. Now, Katika, your platform uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify unconscious bias. Now, that's a very nuanced and challenging thing to identify. How does this exactly work?
So it's their data, our algorithms. What we do is intercept HR decisions across the 5 pillars of talent. So hiring, pay, performance, potential, and promotion. We make recommendations about decisions that they can make and then track their decisions over time.
So what type of companies are you targeting then? Fortune 500s?
Yeah, we target enterprise companies. So certainly the Fortune 500 is in our target, and really companies that have 10,000 or more employees that are committed to gender equity. Typically, they've made some sort of public commitment, either a pledge or another forward-looking statement.
And what has your data shown so far? Can you prove just how much money companies are leaving off the table when they don't address this issue?
Yeah, actually we can. So we started with a research study, and what we across 4,000 companies in 29 countries, and what we found was that for every 10% increase in gender equity toward parity, so toward 50-50, there's a 1 to 2% increase in revenue.
And have your companies been able to directly tie those links?
They've been able to show, they've been able to show a connection between closing the gender equity gap and actually increased revenue.
Now, since starting the company, have you been able to identify the key areas where companies struggle the most? I mean, you mentioned it could be at the hiring level, in terms of pay, promotion.
One of the core things that we see is that it's the internal mobility of talent, right? So you might see that the women make up the majority of individual contributors in an organization, but they don't make it to the top, right? So we know, for instance, year over year, the number of female Fortune 500 CEOs has gone down from 32 to 24, and that is because women actually don't make it up the pipeline. So they're not promoted at the same rate, they are not developed at the same rate. So we actually manage all of those decisions and how you're going to invest in your talent.
So what are some of the actions that you can provide them on this platform?
So we can provide them, for instance, if a company posts a job requisition in their HR platform, we will actually send them a slate of internal candidates that can fill that position, and each of those candidates has a pipeline score, and that is related to that candidate's gender and skill set and the gender and skill set makeup of the team that they would be joining. So that's one example. When they're making pay decisions, we also inform that.
So it's been a year of reckoning in Silicon Valley, in the country at large, when it comes to gender equality, the Me Too movement. Has this sentiment caused more large companies to approach you guys?
I think it's elevated the conversation. I think that what the Me Too movement has done is to share more stories, and bring more voices to the table. And what we also know is that people want a plan of action, right? They want a clear way. How can you mentioned the World Economic Forum and that it'll take over 200 years for us to reach gender equity. We've actually added 47 years in the last year, so we're going backward. We're not going forward. And what people want is a really clear path to achieve gender equity, and that's what we give them with every single decision that they make about their talent.
What's interesting is that you're using AI to combat unconscious bias, but a lot of the concern in the research community is that unconscious bias is written into the algorithms. How do you reconcile that?
So what we know is that if you're aware of it, right, so some of the talk about AI and programming biases into the algorithms is who is actually programming them, right? So if you're not aware of it, then you end up actually programming the unconscious bias into the AI. So being aware of it, you can actually circumvent that.
All right, Pipeline's founder and CEO, Katika Roy, thanks for joining, and I'm looking forward to getting an update on the company.
Thank you.
Coming up, world leaders continue to convene at Bloomberg's Global Business Forum. We'll hear from UK Prime Minister Theresa May, who sat down at the forum with IBM CEO Ginni Rometty to discuss the fears around AI. This is Bloomberg. At Bloomberg's Global Business Forum, world leaders from both the public and private sectors are convening to address some of the global economy's biggest challenges. As artificial intelligence continues to advance, tomorrow's jobs are in question. IBM CEO Ginni Rometty sat down with UK Prime Minister Theresa May and asked her just about these concerns. Now take a listen.
It's one of the challenges that we and other governments around the world face today is that I think for some people, they feel they've, in a sense, been left behind.
Yes.
Globalization, free trade, these are things that benefit other people and not them. Making sure, actually, that people benefit, which they do from free trade, but recognize what it brings, that it brings prosperity, it brings jobs, it brings those opportunities for people for the future. Now, that's partly about government, but it is about working with business. It's about working with business to ensure that we're skilling. Obviously, we've talked about what IBM particularly has been doing in relation to skills. Others also are looking at how they can work to help young people particularly get the skills for the future. But it's also about government setting the right environment in which business can thrive. That's about issues like tax and regulation, but it's about working with business, as we are in our industrial strategy, in our £1 billion industrial strategy challenge fund, with our sector deals, such as our AI sector deal, are about working with business and saying, how can we ensure we're creating the right environment that then enables business to do what it does, which is grow, create jobs, provide prosperity.
Yes, so the world you describe, and I wholeheartedly believe in, is one about inclusive skills for everyone to participate. But you also mentioned, really, we're ushering in a whole new era of technologies, and people have to trust them. This has been a topic near and dear. We met at Davos on this, that it's what was behind you setting up the Center for Ethics that we too have participated with you on. I think everyone would be interested in why this became such at the top of your agenda and your views on that first, and I'll add my own, because I think this is actually the paramount issue, that if people do not trust these new technologies, they will not flourish, by the way, and it will create an even greater have and have-not society. So if you would.
Yes, well, I think this is absolutely right. The economy of the future, I mean, technology is here already, but developing rapidly, and the economy of the future depends on people having access to technology, being able to having skills to use technology, being able to take on those jobs, but in their day-to-day life, trusting that technology. And that's why we set up the Center for Ethics and Data and Innovation. And this is putting these together to make sure that as we see new innovations, as we see developments taking place, we're able to set that ethical framework so people have the confidence of knowing that they don't have to worry about how their data is going to be used. I think we can help people in another way as well, because I think if people see some of this new technology being used to real advantage in their day-to-day lives in ways that perhaps they hadn't thought of, this is also important. If I can give one example, one of our challenges on AI is about how it can actually be used to help to get much earlier diagnosis of some key diseases and health problems that people have. Some really interesting work being done with Deep Minds and Moorfield Hospital on actually using AI to be able to much earlier diagnosis of eye problems, for example, and eye diseases. That can be of real benefit to people. And then if we can show people that this isn't some worrying thing, some scary thing out there that's just going to take your job away. Actually, it's going to change your life for the better. And, by the way, provide new higher paid, higher skilled jobs that you and your children can take on. Then I think we will have, we'll be able to persuade people of the benefits.
That was Prime Minister Theresa May and IBM CEO Ginni Rometty at Bloomberg's Global Business Forum. Now that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Selena Wang. This is Bloomberg.